Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start with the story in which our OP was forced to go to court to deal with his ex-father-in-law. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Ex-father-in-law threatens me with court. Fine, we can go to court. About a year back, my ex-father-in-law took me to court for an incident that happened 5 years previously. While still married, I got into a door dinger with his Jeep. At the time, I offered to buy a new door and help install it. He's a self-proclaimed mechanic and had the know-how. The project fell to the wayside, the door was never purchased and never brought up again. That is, until his daughter and I had a falling out and we divorced 5 years later. So I got served and taken to court for $2,000, a made-up number that he felt was adequate. During mediation, I offered him $1,500 and to never contact me again, at which he scoffed. So I told the mediator I'd like to go before the judge. I informed the judge of the original deal and found a matching door from a scrapyard for $400. The judge took my side and granted my father-in-law $400. It was incredibly gratifying to hear him throw a fit in front of the judge to go ahead and file an appeal now and have the judge tell him that wasn't his job, and walking out of the courtroom as he angrily yelled at me that he'd be seeing me again. Still haven't heard back. And our second story. Never, ever mess with the chef. Some years ago, I worked late-night lead on the line of a very upscale restaurant in our town. The owner had a huge line of credit with the local bank, and the bank's vice president had a kid he'd just bailed out of a cocaine beef in Florida. Any guesses who the boss hires as his new assistant manager? Good guess, to the front of the class. In this restaurant, the back of the house was very tight. We worked our butts off, and we partied hard as well. We had to produce the highest quality product possible, sometimes at a furious pace. A typical lunch rush would see the sauté line running 5 pans at once on a 6-burner stove and plating out about 200 lunches in a single hour. Needless to say, the line ran like a Swiss watch. It was truly something to see. One night it was slower than usual, and the new assistant manager, who I'll call Russell, because that's his name, had been chewing on my line cook, who I'll call David, for no reason except that he knew that he could get away with it, and that's the kind of bully I cannot abide. David was furious. He confronted me in the back of the kitchen and started talking about walking out. I told him that Russell wasn't worth it and he should just take a break in the walk-in and cool off for a bit. He agreed and things slowed down a bit. Later that night, David and I were getting ready to do a pre-close on the line and sweep the floor when Russell came down to the wait station and motioned me to come over. "I'm going to have the grilled salmon and I want you to cook it," he says to me as he's staring at David. He walks off to the front of the house and sits down with paperwork and a bottle of house wine. As I'm prepping the grill, David is really worked up. The stare was the last straw. I try to talk him down, but he isn't having any until I look him in the eye and say, "You know, one thing that I absolutely live by?" He says no, and I slowly reach down into the cooler where we keep the fresh salmon portions, still maintaining eye contact with him. Then I look down at the salmon in my hand and drop it on the floor. David's eyes got huge. I calmly bend down, pick it up, and drop it on the other side. When I pick it up again, I toss it on the grill and say, "Never screw with the cook." David's freaking, and he goes into the back without saying a word. I serve Russell his meal and go back to cleaning. About an hour later, as we're about ready to close, Russell approaches me and says loudly so that David can hear him, "That was the best meal I've ever had in this restaurant. Thank you." And he walked away. I went back to the back and grabbed David, and we both went into the walk-in cooler and busted a gut laughing. Turned out to be a very good night. Rule number 1 if you're going to be a jerk: don't eat in the restaurant that you manage unless you cook it yourself. And our last story. Never, ever piss off your garbage handler. My father's a shy and quiet man. Growing up, he and I weren't close. He didn't quite understand my overly dramatic responses to everything. We didn't connect on any level. The only time he generally spoke to me was when he was angry with me because I was arguing with my mom. However, when I was 11, I was able to form a special secret bond with my father. We did a very bad thing and then kept the secret from my mother, and in my mind, the authorities. This secret, which will now no longer be a secret, has bonded us together ever since. To this day, we still talk about the time when we practically broke the law. My dad still beams with pride as if it was his crowning moment. It's a story I treasure because it's ours. Sunday was obligatory church day in our house. My mother taught Sunday school, and my brother attended Sunday school. I sang in the children's choir, and my dad was a deacon or some such ranking official. After church, my mother would stay in town and pick up greeting cards at the Hallmark store or refill prescriptions. On this particular Sunday, my parents had driven separately to church, so my father wouldn't have to partake in card shopping. My brother was going with my mom. I weighed my options. I decided to forego shopping and hopped in my father's pickup truck. "We have to stop off at the shop," my father said. My father was the owner and operator of the town's only garbage removal company, Waste Away Disposal Service, a refuse you can't offer. We didn't have city-funded garbage service in our tiny village, and my father had trucks, employees, a shop/garage, offices, and he also managed the city dump. As a child, I was always embarrassed of his work. Kids would pick on me about being a garbage picker or always having enough to eat. Later in life, I'd come to appreciate the financial benefits to being the daughter of a garbage picker. Later in life, I've come to appreciate the financial benefits to being the daughter of a garbage picker, and have since been quite proud of my father's business. As we pulled up to the shop, I noticed 2 garbage trucks parked in front of the garage. My dad immediately started swearing, "That effing son of a b! I'm GD tired of his bullcrap! He's stealing from me! $7 a month, and he's stealing from me! GD son of a b! Emily, get in the GD garbage truck!" This was probably more words than my father had ever spoken to me, and the first time I'd heard him say the F word. I was alarmed. As I climbed in the garbage truck, my father explained, an angry guy who lived around the corner refused to pay his garbage bill, and had gotten upset with my father about the fee of $7 a month for garbage service. After some yelling, he promptly canceled his service with my father. Then the guy started sneaking his garbage over to the shop at night and throwing it in the back of the garbage trucks that weren't parked inside. He was, in fact, stealing from my father. My father continued on to say the guy wasn't terribly smart, as he always threw away his mail with his name and address and was easily identified. As we pulled up, he'd noticed new garbage thrown in the back of the truck, not compressed, including letters and magazines. "I've had 6 conversations with that guy about throwing his garbage in here. I told him I was going to take him to court if he didn't quit." I didn't know what was going on, but I was quite afraid of how angry my dad was. I'd never seen that part of him before. I thought maybe we were going to drive over to the guy's house and fight him. I was truly scared of what might happen because I didn't consider my dad a good fighter. He was too shy and nice. My dad backed the full garbage truck onto the street and turned the corner. We soon pulled up to a ranch-style home with a sizable front yard. I could only assume this was Angry Guy's house, but I was still completely unsure what my dad had in mind. Instead of pulling into the driveway, my father swore a few more times and backed the garbage truck through the front yard, stopping precisely at the moment the back of the truck touched the cement set of porch stairs. There were deep tire tracks in the grass, and mud troughs had formed where grass once grew. Crime 1. Destruction of property. I was only able to observe what was going on outside through the side mirror, but from inside the truck, I noticed my father pushing buttons and pulling levers. Then I realized what was happening. My father was dumping the entire garbage truck filled with trash onto the man's front steps and porch. This was all the trash that truck had picked up and compacted in a day. This was much more than Angry Man's trash. It was half the town's trash. As we pulled away, my father exclaimed, "I bet he doesn't dump his garbage in my trucks again." I looked back as we drove off to see a mountain and a half of garbage propped perfectly in front of the house, piled high on the cement patio. The wrought iron railing held it all neatly in place, and the front door was no longer visible behind the wall of refuse. Crime 2. Littering. Crime 3. Front yard invasion. I kept imagining Angry Guy walking out his front door in his bathrobe, bleary-eyed and searching for his Sunday paper, only to find a mountain of trash he'd have no way of removing. I imagined him taking a few seconds to realize who'd done the deed and then calling the police to have us arrested. My dad just smiled. I think he was imagining the man in his bathrobe standing in a pile of garbage too. Then, in typical father form, my father said, "Don't tell your mother. That was probably illegal." In that instant, I knew I was special. My dad trusted me with his illegal activities, and now I had something in common with him, a connection I'd never had before. Although I was somewhat horrified of the whole incident, I was excited to have something to talk about with my dad when I visited him in jail. I was also secretly proud that my dad was such a bad dude. We quickly drove back to the shop and got into my dad's pickup and headed home. I was speechless, and my father was too busy beaming to say a word. We arrived 4 minutes later. I didn't look my mother in the eye. I feared she would see the crimes written in my pupils. I knew the police would soon be taking me away. Based on what I'd learned about jail from TV, I determined I was an accomplice. I'd most likely be going to jail for 10 to 15 years, and my dad'd certainly get life. I tried not to cry as I sat on the couch, searching out the window, waiting for the police to come. I was afraid for weeks, always fearful when a car pulled down our street. The police never came, and my father and I kept our secret. One day, years later, he told me the guy started coming to the dump religiously after that and paid to dump his trash there instead. He never said a word to my dad about the mountain of trash, and apparently no witnesses ever put me at the scene of the crime. Now every time I bring up that story, my dad laughs so hard he cries. He's still so proud of the day he took down the man who stole from him. He always finishes the story with, "He never did dump his trash in my trucks again." Then he always says between tears, "I guess we really did have a refuse he couldn't offer." I never did understand that slogan, but I too laugh until I cry just the same. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.